Welcome back to the Intuition Incubator. Today, I'm excited to have with us Happy Ollie. Happy is the author of the Intuition Bible, How and Why to Tap into Your Inner Wisdom. With a BA degree in psychology from UCLA, he is a prophetic dreamer, certified master NLP practitioner, certified master clinical hypnotherapist, and host of the Happy Insights podcast. Happy's spiritual journey began in 1995 when he dedicated his life to the exploration of metaphysical disciplines after a near-death experience inspired by a dramatic awakening. Now, Happy teaches and shares the subconscious manifestation methodology he created globally. Welcome, Happy.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Abby. I'm really excited. It seems like we're both very aligned, which could make for a very interesting or boring conversation. I'm down to find out. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go. Well, we are so aligned. And listen, you wrote a book called The Intuition Bible. So let's start there. Tell us about it and what inspired you to write it.
Well, I was actually writing a book called The Heart Lens, which was not a sequel. It was the second book I was writing following the book I wrote, the Charisma Within, which was 15 steps to enhance your inner magnetism and not to really compare yourself to the world and just see the life that you're living through a different kind of lens. And then the Heart Lens was a lot like the Heart Math Institute. And I was writing it, and then there was a point where I was about 75% done, and I thought, this just sounds like a lot of repetition. And although I was almost done, and it takes a lot to write a book, and I had a team and everything. I don't have ghostwriters because I don't really do any of that. I'm a natural channeled writer. And I went to sleep one night with a big prayer, and I talked to the inner worlds within me and said, hey, use me, bring something different that has a new angle on a topic that the world needs to hear and that could help bridge humanity from where they are to their next spiritual evolution. Because everyone talks about the fifth dimension and how we're going to be telepathic and all these things that everyone keeps talking about, but no one has like a clear blueprint on how to get from here to there. For someone like me, and someone like me is I am equally right-brained and left-brained, which means I'm equally intuitive and logical at the same time. I'm what I call a skeptic mystic. So I really wanted to reach, that's why I studied psychology and metaphysics. I have my degree in you can't really get a degree in metaphysics, but 29 years of it, I think I have the PhD in it. And I just thought, I got to know both worlds. And because I want to speak to the majority of the world who are kind of lost in the mix of this right and left. So I went to sleep and I woke up with 15 chapters, which I thought were the entire book of the Intuition Bible. And it wasn't called the Intuition Bible. It was How to Unleash Your Inner Wisdom. Because intuition is a very limiting word. When you say intuition to people, they already have a definition of it. And I didn't really want them to have a definition of the inner world. But the day that I decided to submit the book to the first publishers that I was going to submit it to, something in my head said, you got to call it the Intuition Bible. Because I wanted to be a textbook for all things intuitive or all things that come from not the logical mind. And my publishers, the first ones that saw it, picked it up and they said, well, the reason we looked at it was because of the name. So it's that synchronicity that I follow and I teach. And I want to take credit for choosing the topic, but now I know why I was a person to write it. And I know why I was supposed to write it, but I still can't take credit for anything other than putting my hands on the typewriter and typing.
So tell us what intuition is to you then. What is the definition of intuition?
Well, anything other than the usual stuff that gets conjured up in the conscious mind and the left side of the brain, to me, is intuition. It is all information that comes from the entire world, your within world and your without world, that is not being computed in the same way as our logical thinking mind is computing with the regular knowledge that we already have. Because our mind tends to take information from the past with the expectations of how things worked out and come up with a computation of how the future will be and what your possible outcomes will be and what the probable outcomes will be. And I believe that the entire world is tapped into a multidimensional reality, which goes within and out.
Mm-hmm.
And it is from your parallel universes, multiverse, to your inner world, which is hard to describe, but I kind of give a tree analogy in the book that describes it better. And when we quiet the five senses, when we slow down our brain waves, we tune into the inner world, because the inner world works on a much slower brain wave, which is alpha, theta if you're about to fall asleep, or even delta, which you're when you're in sleep mode. And it requires you to shut down your reliance on the five senses. Now, I didn't say shut off the five senses, your reliance on the five senses. And when you do that, you tune into a new frequency that when you access the sky is the limit, and time and space and the laws of physics no longer apply. And you can have access to new information that is tailored to you and for you. Did that answer that question?
Yeah. You know what I really love about it, though, is that that is really like how I was. That's why, and the name for this podcast, Intuition Incubator, dropped into me in meditation. And it's like this broad spectrum that I am looking at it under, right? Which includes all of these things that you're talking about. So let's go there. Talk to us about metaphysics. Talk to us about this, what you just said. What is all of that? How does the everyday person who doesn't think about these things and doesn't maybe even really realize why it might be important to know about them, break down the metaphysical world for us in a way that they can understand that and why they even should care?
Well, basically, this is all a fun game that is designed for transformation. When I say this, I'm talking about the physical life that we live in. It is like a playground where we transform, we gain new muscles, where we expand and grow. And because of us growing and expanding, our soul and the soul aspect of us also transforms and grows. So when we come into this world, we obviously don't come into this world from a 3D perspective. There is another dimension. We'll just, my sons just call it heaven, where we come from, where there is knowledge that goes way beyond where we're going to go, and it knows where we've been, and it knows what the possible outcomes are, and it has an agenda. It's really important to consider the idea that your soul has an agenda when it comes into this body. It doesn't just throw itself into a body, says, I'm going to put all my resources, not all my resources, but a lot of my resources and a lot of attention and time into this body and this personality that is about to be formed, and let them just go do whatever the heck they want. I'm going to give them free will for them to do, even though the soul has free will as well, because it puts us here. But once we're in here, we have amnesia. I'm going to put them in this world and give them their five senses and let them figure out how to stay alive. And also to make sure that there's a fail safe. I'm going to communicate with them. I'm going to whisper. I'm going to guide them, or him or her, through this life to live the best life possible using all available non-physical resources. Because the one thing that everyone can agree on is that we are all energy, and we live on multiple levels. I mean, look at the microscope. When you look into it, there's so much happening. If you look into our bodies, there's so much happening. There's so much intelligence. And let me tell you something, your cells are not functioning on your little brain's ability to function, because our brains can only handle about 167 bits of data per second and about 7 chunks of information at a time, which is not what our entire body If our body required just that, we would be dead in no time. So we are already aware as scientists and as people that are digging into further knowledge in quantum physics that there is greater intelligence that our body is tapped into. And so that's just one level. Another level is the soul level. And the soul has other like-minded souls that it collaborates with. Those are called collectives. And there's angelic beings. There's spirit guides, or other people call them different things, that are there to help us along the way with their own expertise. And all of those beings and entities, just people on other dimensions, other planets, other parts of the universe, which we are connected to once we take the physical aspect out. Distance goes away. We become one collective thing. And once we tap into that, then we have a well of resource that is designed to help us, and it has a strong agenda. You have an agenda, I have an agenda, your mom has an agenda, your parents, your children, everyone has an agenda. And none of their agenda has anything to do with you. It's their own agenda. But your inner world and inner being and that inner perspective does have one agenda, and it is your well-being. And it is to guide you step by step through life, through every single winding turn, and help you make the best possible decisions. Now, whether we listen to it or not is another story. So that is the benefit of learning to tap into your inner world, because you have extra guide. It's like having a brand new best friend that you've always had, but is kind of speaks very slowly or quietly, and you never paid attention to them because you were so busy trying to figure yourself out. And now it's time to listen to that wise friend, because the veil is thinner and that voice is actually getting louder, but you have to train yourself into listening to that voice.
So before I ask more about the training part, I want to speak to any of the listeners who are saying, well, if I'm here as a playground on this earth, and it's got my back and all these kinds of things, then why do hard things happen? Why do all of these really, really difficult things happen?
My son asked me the same question today. He's 7.5, and he's like, why did so many bad things happen to you up until now? And I said, honey, it was because, first of all, people need to relearn who they are. And we come into this world as babies. And I always use a muscle, like a bodybuilder as an example. Like, your soul is empowered. It knows what it's capable of. It knows how things always work out. It knows so much. And then all of a sudden it's stuck in this little baby that doesn't remember anything. Now I think about the soul as a big bodybuilder that can lift like 300 pounds. Okay. And then all of a sudden it's in a frail little baby, and it wants to kind of go back to where it started so it can kind of take off where it left off. So I believe that one of the many reasons, because the universe hits 1,000 stones with 1,000 birds with one stone. I don't like using the word bird. 1,000 targets with one stone, because it's so efficient. One of the main reasons is that it needs to grow back its muscles and remember who it is. Mm-hmm. And it's through trial and tribulation that you remember who you are. Now, I've lost a son when he was 4.5 years old. And let me tell you something, overcoming that or going through that has given me more faith in life and more strength than anything else that I had experienced before. And as a teacher, I am more capable of teaching way more people now because of that. Now, would I give anything? I would give it all up to have my sons back. But when I take a look at my life from a larger perspective, I realized how many more people I've been able to touch and how much more I've been on my soul's purpose because of the death of my 4.5-year-old son, and how much I've learned in the process. So I think it's just a matter of perspective. Like today, I don't know when this is going to be aired, but today we have an election in in the United States, and everybody's on the opposite ends, and people are freaking out about who's going to win. And of course, I have a favorite, but no matter who's going to win, it's going to propel our society forward
Mhm.
because it's going to piss some people off. It's going to make some people happy. It's going to make some people pissed off again. And then it's going to create this momentum, a forward growing momentum that causes the evolution of this country. So it's all a matter of perspective. And yes, it does suck to go through crappy stuff, but it does help when you've got faith and you've got an inner knowing that tells you you're fine. Everything's
Yeah.
going to be okay. And nothing's wrong with this world.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so powerful. And I really can't think of a more powerful example than having lost a 4.5-year-old son. Um, that's particularly at that age, it's hard, I think, for people to wrap their heads around, well, how can someone pick themselves up and move through life, let alone have this larger perspective? And I have a child that has a degenerative neuromuscular disorder, and it's I always say, his soul, like, I don't know. Like, he's here so that I can catch up to him. Like, his body may not be able to do the things that my body can do, but my soul is here to catch up with his level of consciousness. And I think that that can be really hard for people who are just getting through day to day life and having big losses or whatnot to even like contemplate, well, what is Happy saying? Like, what in the world? How could he possibly, um, view it this way?
Well, I've got a couple of things to say. First of all, I think comparing each other's experience is really difficult because we assume that having an extremely healthy body or having a perfect life is what we're supposed to be doing. But life is like yoga. If you've ever done yoga, the beginner has a hard time going to the next position, just like the expert also has just as much of a hard time going to the next position. And if you look at everyone as these people doing yoga, and we're all just trying to kind of expand our current state of being and stop comparing the different people in the class, then you might stop being so hard on other people going through what they're going through. And so that's the thing with you and your son. I can't imagine being in your position just in the same way that you can't imagine being in mine. But so here's where the inner knowing kicks in. This is why I think it's really important to listen to the inner voice. Now, the birth of that son was shown to me in a dream when I was 30 and I was living a fully fun, free life as a gay guy. And they showed me that my best friend was going to have my baby, who was a lesbian, who was married, who had a daughter, who was my goddaughter. And I met my son. I got to hold him. And then I woke up in the middle of the night crying from the joy of having a child, called my best friend the next morning, said, "We're having a baby. It's a boy." And she said, "No, we're not. You're not part of our plan." I said, "Well, I have prophetic dreams." So I met him. He's beautiful. And I can't wait for you to meet him. A year and a half later, we had him. And I only not gained him as my son, I also adopted my goddaughter as my daughter. So now I have these two kids with these two lesbians. Have this beautiful five family. Life is amazing. Of course, I have other prophetic dreams, but they're more about mundane stuff. And then 4.5 years later, I have a dream that my dad and then my other best friend are being buried. And it was really heavy because it was one of those, I know I've learned how to decipher prophetic dreams. So then I woke up and I called first checked on my dad and my other best friend, and they were both fine. And my dad always lies because he lives in another country. But I just made sure. I was like, "Dad, if you're dying or something, please let me know." Called my best friend, said, "Hey, two people are dying." She said, "Oh, you and your dream's happy." I said, "That same dream is why we have a son." But in her
Mhm.
mind, she's like, "No, we have a son because I asked you to be the dad." I said, "No." Then my conditions were turkey baster style, 3 times max, and it happened. It's miraculous. People don't just have babies like that. Um, Anyway, so that could have been justified. And 2.5 months after that, I had a dream of a car accident, and there was a woman in the front, a guy in the back, and they said goodbye. And that day, my son died, and my daughter was in the car too. But as much as that felt like a curse, like why would you dream the death of your child? People are like, never dream about me. It was probably the most comforting thing I've ever experienced because I saw that things happen on an energetic level first. I saw that there were two dreams leading up to the actual event. I saw that even though it was an accident, it was meant to be. And it changed my perspective. Then I had this guide. So I talk in the book about tuning into the correct frequency to receive information from your inner world. And when my son died, I was very familiar with his energy signature and also enmeshed with his energy signature. So when he died, I was able to communicate with him immediately through my dreams. Luckily, I had been studying Esther Hicks at the time, Abraham Hicks, and her husband had just died, and she had taught that in order to communicate with the dead, you have to be in a higher frequency. So find any reason to laugh. If you think of them, don't get upset all of a sudden, even though it was impossible because I was dying. But in my dreams, I could do it at the time. I couldn't breathe for about 2 months after he died. But in my dreams, I started asking questions. So the first night I went to sleep and I said, hey, is Faith, my daughter, going to be okay? Because she was in a car accident and she was in ICU or NICU, or not, no, it was ICU by that age. And she wasn't going to make it. She was in a coma.
Yeah.
And he said, Daddy, I'm okay. He had a friend there. And he said, she's going to be fine. And then he started guiding me through the process. He told me why he had to die, why he had to be born. Because my first question is, why did you bring this child into my life, soul?
Just to take him away, right?
Yeah. What's the point?
Yeah.
And I asked him, and because I had this ability to openly communicate, I got all the answers that I needed over time. And ironically, like 2 weeks later, not even 2 weeks, I was drying him off from the shower, from his bath in my dream. And he said, Daddy, you're having another baby. And I said, oh, no, hell no. So he introduced me over time and kind of eased the idea. And I met this curly haired baby and I was holding him in the water and there was a straight haired baby outside. And I said, I fell in love with this dumb baby. I don't want to call him dumb. I just didn't want to go through that. And I just said, are you coming back as him? And he said, no, but you're going to love him. And then I said, oh, I have no money. I quit my job because of you, because I wanted to make sure I had my degree. And I got into UCLA the day after he died. And I was making like $30,000 a year. It's $100,000 to have a baby and you can't put it on a credit card or anything. But he kept giving me the cues. And I don't know if it was really him or whether it was my inner being or whatever it was, but it was showing, my subconscious was showing it to me as my son because I trusted him. And sure enough, a year and a half later, my twins were born, who are 7.5 years old right now. And the life that I'm living now is a direct result of the very first dream that told me I was going to have a baby. And so your soul, when you're falling off your path, will find 1,000 ways to convey a message to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think of that way as intuition too, right? Like when you are off path, your intuition is always trying to bring you back. And you know what, in hindsight, I went off path.
And, sometimes not even in hindsight, because
right.
So many times we know what we're supposed to do and we don't do it. When I had my near-death experience when I was 17, I went to sleep one person and I woke up another person. I thought I had died and they had downloaded, they'd replaced me with a wise soul that now had the answers to everything. And I said, I'm here to change the world, or I'm here to uplift the world, not change. And my aunt said, you're 17. Like, who the heck are you to do this? I said, but this is my calling. I've been told that I'm supposed to uplift the world. And the world talked me out of it. They said, you're an amazing artist. You love to draw women. You need to become a makeup artist. Sure, I made a ton of money being a makeup artist, but it wasn't my soul's path and I was never fulfilled. I went through the steps. I made women as beautiful as I could, and it was really good. and I felt empty. The best part was just talking to people and making them feel better. And then but I knew I was off my path because every door that could possibly open for me to pursue my career on a big scale would close. And
Ah,
so my soul was supporting me by closing doors.
yeah,
And people think that closed doors means your soul has abandoned you.
yeah, yeah. But
And
it's
eventually it guided me through my dreams because that was my path of least resistance.
Yeah, yeah. It's so I think that's so relatable. And people will continue, myself included. I mean, I had a long journey of that, right? Where people will continue to just keep trying and trying and trying for something that is not coming together. And they're comparing themselves to other people. They're beating themselves up. They're blaming themselves. They're then taking 70,000 more classes to get better at this, that, and the other. And, just absolutely making themselves insane. And at the end of the day, they are not meant to be doing what they're trying to do, and they're not doing it for the right reasons. And the relief that comes when you settle in, when you accept what am I supposed to be doing, and you settle into that, even though it may be scary. Um, speak to what that's like to be finally settled comfortably and in alignment.
It's still scary um, because I'm a master manifester. And that was something my mom just instilled in me when I was really young. She says, whenever you want something, it'll always happen because it's part of my genetics that I'm handing off to you. And we didn't know about the word manifestation. I just knew if I wanted something bad enough, there was no stopping me. And I went to Iran one time. I was 23 and I met this guy who I fell in love with. But every single thing said you're not meant to be with him. But my love for him and my passion was so strong. I had learned about if you get married and you can intertwine your energies and then your power is even stronger because he was powerless. He was living this powerless world. I knew my power. So I came to the United States and it was not legal to be married at the time, or it was punishable by death in Iran. It still is. And I said, I will do everything. I will move mountains until you move here. And I used every single ability that I had. This is pre-secret, pre-people knowing who Abraham Mix is. And it took me a year and a half to get him here. And it was the worst time marriage of my life. And it took 20 years. We broke up after 4 years. Because I have a hard time letting go of things. It took me 20 years to truly get over this person. And it took a lot of betrayal. And I realized the worst thing that I did in my life was force something by refusing to allow closed doors to sway my direction.
Ah, that's so powerful. Let's just repeat that again. Say that
Well,
again.
I said, I refused to allow closed doors to sway my direction. And I went against my soul's calling because I was empowered enough to know that I can make anything happen.
So, how
And
do you know the difference? How do you know the difference? Because there's a part, right, that says, wait a minute, we're taught not to let a closed doors dissuade us. And, somebody listening here could be like, well, okay, let me, that sounds great. This is hard. I'm going to give up now. I don't want to, I'm not going to play this episode for my kids. I don't want them to have that message. How do you know the difference between when it's a closed door that you need to move through versus a closed door that's really trying to give you a message?
there's a really cool book called The Intuition Bible. No, no. And so here's the thing. This is what I encourage. And you got to figure out how to talk to your inner self and your soul. You have to figure out this language. It's just like when you learned how to talk, you couldn't speak English if you're speaking English right now. You couldn't learn it overnight. And you're not going to learn this overnight. You need to practice, learn how to say one thing until you get better at it. There is a moment, and there's easier techniques, there's harder techniques. There is a moment where you have to get into the practice of checking in. Does this thing that I'm doing right now, or is this thing that I'm doing right now in alignment with my soul's purpose? And if you can't feel the answer, say, send me signs, send me some indications, show me. And when you learn how to communicate, when you take the time to communicate, It's like having 4 people call you at once. You got to learn, see which person you're going to answer first or whose opinion has more weight. And guess what? And once you learn how to talk to your inner self in a way that you recognize the answer, ask the question, are these doors closed because I'm supposed to gain these muscles, or are these doors closed because I'm going against my soul's purpose? Now, here's the thing. There is never a mistake. So guess what? Those 20 years of torture or 4 years of hell taught me so much about this to where I can speak on this now.
Yeah.
So who's to say that wasn't my soul's purpose? But I know there was an easier way for me to find love. And I could have probably learned this in an easier way with less of a dramatic experience, because the universe will whisper stuff to you to teach you stuff. If you hear, then great, you learn it. Then if you don't learn it, it's going to shout it. Say it louder. Don't learn it, it's going to shout it. If not, it's going to shake you to your core. So the more you learn to listen to the whispers, you can still learn a lesson. You can still pick up a dumbbell one at a time until you gained enough muscle to pick the big one. Or you can pick up the big one over and over, throw out your back over and over and over and go to the doctor until you finally have the strength to do it. It's your call whether you want to live a life that's connected to something greater with greater guidance, or whether you just want to keep banging your head around against walls. So that's a decision you have to make.
Yeah, because you don't need to have this awareness or higher consciousness to live a physically healthy life. You can live in very old age, you can live healthily. You don't have to do this, right? So it's just like you said, it is a choice, right? That you have to decide if you want to do. And it takes some practice, and it takes some intention and belief and education.
There are 2 people in my life that have, I would call, the most successful marriage, most successful life, most happy children. And they're the non-spiritual people in my family. But they follow their bliss. They find something they like, they ignore everything else, and they follow their bliss. They do what they feel is right, and they put their 100% into it, and they don't do something that doesn't feel right to them. So that's another formula. But most of us don't do that. So that's why we need to have books like this.
Well, their soul might have worked something out in a past life. And now this life is kind of allowing them.
Yeah, because both of them came to this world with this lovely thing. But like, for example, this aunt of mine, and she's in the book, she doesn't believe in the dead like I do, and talking to the dead and all that stuff. So her Irish twin, her brother, who was a year older than her, died of COVID. And she's a master repressor, does not process anything, just ignores stuff, lives her life, right? And she lives a very good life, by the way. So I had a dream that she was getting visited by a bunch of important people. I called her up. I said, "Hey, you're getting a lot of visitors." And she's like, "It's COVID." "No, we're not." And she said, "But I am going to go visit the grave today because she was freshly buried." He got there. Somebody was standing on the grave because it was an unmarked grave, and she freaked out and went into the hysterical state, which is a trance. Mm-hmm. And she started seeing him and all the dead relatives. And she was physically incapable of taking herself home. So they took her home, and she's laying there. She's like, "Oh my God, you're all there. Why are we all even crying when all of you are sitting around here?" And she's talking. Nobody else is seeing the dead people, just her. And then I have another spiritual aunt who is like guiding her through it. And her husband's freaking out. Take her back, bring her home, because he's against all that stuff. And she's like, "What are they wearing? What are they saying?" And my aunt is telling all this stuff, and she's calm and relaxed. And when they finally snapped her out of it, her conscious mind, which didn't believe in all that stuff, and her experience, which did have that experience, there was a cognitive dissonance. They couldn't meld together. Belief systems couldn't agree with each other. So she got short-term memory loss, kind of like Dory from Finding Nemo. And they call me frantically because this is all happening in Iran. They're like, she can't remember anything. She doesn't remember she doesn't know that she's about to have a grandchild. She doesn't remember who died. She keeps thinking, she knows. What do we do? I said, put her to sleep. and let her brain figure out what's important and what matters for her and what's relevant to her belief system. Because your belief system determines what you experience in life. And when she wakes up, she'll have what she needs to survive. So she goes to sleep, she wakes up, everyone's like, "Do you remember me?" And she's like, "Yeah, I remember you guys." And then her brain had erased the entire 24 hours, which include all the crumbs that would have led her to that experience, because it needed to get rid of all the breadcrumbs. Luckily, her son's a tech geek and recorded everything from the time she woke up,
Oh my
her
gosh.
drive there, because it was not intrusive there. They just he just loves tech. So, and she's very comfortable. There's no secrets. So she got to experience her entire life for 24 hours through video.
Wow.
So you would think
Yeah.
that now she's a converted spiritual person
No.
who believes she talks to death. She's just like, "Oh, that was just a dream."
That was just a dream. Oh
Yeah.
my
So,
gosh.
so your belief system in general, whether you think you're intuitive, you're not intuitive, whether you think it's important to you, whether you think it's valuable to you, whether you think it would improve your life, determines how much intuitive messages you actually do receive. And if you're able to interpret them or not, because you do receive a lot of intuitive information in each moment, whether you think you do or not. It's just a matter of whether your conscious mind it becomes aware of it through the process of attenuation, which means it takes 11 millions of bits of data per second and whittles it down to 160 something. And all of that gets stored in your body. But if we don't think that information is important, it gets deleted. Well, not deleted, just stored in the body.
Yeah, I love what you're saying here. And I just want to emphasize that. So your belief system determines what you're going to experience in this life, right? So as you're saying this, what do you advise for those people who maybe have an understanding of what you're talking about? They have a desire to manifest and do all of these things. They're trying so hard, but subconsciously they don't believe something. So it's very much an intellectual exercise. And they're coming up against what they know is a subconscious belief, but yet what do?
Lower the stakes. When you lower the stakes, then the outcome is not as important. If you don't care about the outcome, and you just live life to live, then you have more options for success. You have more chances of success. And I know this goes against everything what people say. You have to have a goal and a focus. When it comes to something like this is not the end all. You're not trying to build a house or something where you need to know the blueprint of everything. You're just experimenting with a new skill that you have and lower the outcome. I do stuff like I guess the time.
Guess the time. Oh, yeah.
Guess the time. Before you look at your phone, guess the time. And really just guess it. And then don't get discouraged when you're wrong. Just get into the practice of guessing the time every single day. First, or look back in your past. Every time you had an intuitive feeling and you didn't follow it, or you followed it, acknowledge it, write it down. The more you write stuff down and say, "Hey, today I was off by 1 minute. Tomorrow I was off by 2 minutes," whatever. The more you write it down, the more you're signaling to the subconscious that this is important to you. And the subconscious wants you to be right. So it really does want to prove you right. And take the woo-woo out, take talking to angels and soul purpose out. Just start communicating with the subconscious. The subconscious has been watching my body language this whole time. It knows if I'm being genuine or not. It knows if my voice tone is genuine or whether I'm making stuff up. It's very clear because it knows body language, it knows tonality, and communication happens 55% on body language levels, 38% on tone, and 7% on what I'm saying. So you're aware of my words when your subconscious is very much aware of the rest of me. You're aware of my tone as well, but you're really paying attention to the words. That's what's taking up most of your conscious awareness. But later you can say, "Hey, was that happy guy full of crap?"
Right.
And if you learn to communicate with your subconscious, you'll be like, "Oh, no, he wasn't." Or maybe he was. Maybe what he said didn't resonate with me because he's not the person who's going to be the one who's going to open me up to this. So that's why even when it comes to teachers of the same topic, You need to listen to different people and read different books on the same topic. Don't just say, I read this book on intuition. It sounds like BS. Say, I read 5 books on intuition and I didn't resonate with 4 of them. I resonated with the message of 1. So go into it. Someone who's completely anti-science and anti-subconscious is going to read my book and say, no, I needed to hear about how to talk to my angels now. And there was only 2 chapters on that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So this is bullshit.
Yeah.
But somebody who's really on the fence, who really wants to know how it all works, wants to know the nuts and bolts of how everything just happens, will love my voice and the way that I speak. Will love the way that I speak. So if you're curious, play. Pretend you're a little kid and you're trying to learn how to throw a ball. Not even trying to walk, because when you're trying to walk, you do have the intent. Well, when you're trying to move as a child, you're not hell-bent on running. You're like, I just want to get from point A to point B. So be happy when you're scooting.
Well, and I can't remember who said it, but when a kid is learning how to walk, when a child's learning how to walk, you don't, and they're falling over. Nobody looks at that kid and is like, oh, well, he's just a loser. He's not going to get it. I guess we just got to give up on that now. Right. Like he's going to crawl his whole life. Can't do it. Right. And so why is it, that we are so quick to give up on strengthening this muscle? Right.
Because we don't think it's important. Because
we don't believe it's really true. We don't really believe it's there. And yet you say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But I mean, there's so much evidence of it. I mean, I guess, you know what, if you believe something to be true, nothing's going to change your mind. I have my uncle, who I just talked about. He shows up every year, every 6 months. He shows up, and I always have a dream of a death. This is the big ones. And he sees the person dying, and still to this day, I was like, "Oh, I wrote a book on intuition." He's like, "Oh, that's interesting." And we get along on it, on everything else. He's like, "Oh, but it's fun that you wrote a book on something I don't really believe in." I'm like, "How many death dreams do I have to have for you to see that there is a future with the world that we have access to, or the birth of my child?" He's like, "Oh, it's a coincidence." He even had a dream about his granddaughter freaking out over shoes, woke up to her freaking out over shoes and thought, "Oh, what a coincidence. I must have heard her
talk about it." Is this prophetic dreaming something that you developed, or is it something you always had? And I know you say that like everybody has this capacity.
I didn't have it in the beginning, but there was so much talk about it in my family, and I wanted to be one of those people. And I think that I was also so clueless in my life, not clueless, but really not. I think I was destined for something greater, and because my family fostered the idea that you can have prophetic dreams, I ended up being able to access it, but it didn't really show up until big stuff started happening, because I'm such an emotional person, and I know that it really did help me. So dreams happen on different levels. So first is the first level of dreams, which is just your subconscious mind, like filing stuff and sorting stuff out and just kind of dealing with your everyday life. That's the surface level. Then the next one is it's showing you pre-manifestation awareness, which means it shows you what your emotions are. So it says, hey, if you keep this emotion up, then you're going to have a bad life in the future. It's energy in its early maturity. So I talk about energy. Energy, let's say a thought form is at 0% or 1%, and then full manifestations at 99.999%. So you can have access to how you're doing energetically, emotionally, when it's in 20 to 30% kind of maturity, which means you can stop it. You can change the way you think and change the way that you're viewing stuff. But there is a point where I call it the point of no return, and where it's already so matured and the momentum's built so much that it's going to happen. And that's what I tap into when I tap into that world. And it's everyone can do it. It's just a matter of whether you want to do it. Some people say, I would never want to have a death dream, because there is anxiety that comes with it. I just had one 3 days ago. And there's a lot of anxiety because sometimes I know who it is and sometimes I don't. I have a death avatar that shows up. When she shows up, somebody dies 2 months later on the dot. So she
Oh,
shows up. She showed up like 2 days ago. And of course, the logical mind, like, oh, maybe this is my very first dream in 15 years that no one's going to die.
right.
Um, but we already know the timer's ticking. And my friend's like, if no one dies, you're going to be so upset because she will kick your streak will be gone. And I was like, well, hopefully I'm not in the front row. Because death is such a natural process. We can't vilify death. I told my people at my son's funeral, I said, he graduated life at 4 with a bunch of Nutella and cheeseburgers. So not even cheeseburgers, French fries. So don't tell me my son's life was less than yours. He didn't get to have all the crap you have. So death is just a natural process. But so there's those dreams. And then there's dreams where you literally cross dimensions, which actually happens every night. But a lot of times our subconscious can't process it enough for us to remember it. And you tap into worlds where your dead family is or another reality exists. When there's a place where I go to, and my grandma did too, it's like an actual home that I lived in. And I know it's a past life. And I go and have these experiences all the time. And I have the same identity, same personality, and I go into that world and I wake up and I'm like, oh, there I was again. So
Hmm.
it just depends on what you want to do with it. Um, any skill that you want is yours to have. It's just a matter of whether it comes easy to you or if it comes harder to you or whether you care enough to develop it. So I encourage people to try different techniques, see which one comes easier and hone in on that. And as you hone in on that, then other ones might come, they might not come. The best thing you can do is learn how to talk to your subconscious in a way that just says, is this good for me or is this bad for me? That's it. And then when
Yeah.
you're at a crossroads, ask the damn question, get the answer, move along. You don't need to be a prophetic dreamer. You don't need to be a channel unless that's what your calling is. You don't need anything. All you need is day-to-day guidance to know if you're making the right choices or not.
Yeah, I'm glad you came back to that. That tapping into self and feeling in the body. Like, what is the answer there? And trusting that place. One of the things that you say is that we've really been um, we've muted our intuition, and I've written about that before. I always used to say that my intuition was bouncing around in a soundproof Tupperware box. You know, so speak to that. Some people may be surprised to hear that. What speak to that?
Well, first of all, it's supposed to be muted because you're here to survive and live. So your five senses have to be so loud that you don't accidentally walk into a room full of tigers or something and get killed because you were so busy daydreaming or when you're daydreaming in class and you're like living in another world and all of a sudden the teacher is done with the lecture.
Yeah.
That's when you're tapping into your world of imagination. Guess what? You missed out on life. So it's really designed for you. It's not like society talked you out of it. Although they do that. But it's really, the system is designed for the five senses to be the loudest and your inner voice to be a whisper. But a balanced human being will go exercise, will read books, and will also meditate and quiet their mind, or at least just check in. I do this exercise where I say, ask a yes question that it's a yes, scan your full body and see what part of it lights up or tightens, and ask a question that says no, and do this like 20 times and learn what part of your body is trying to say means yes and what means no. But you cannot do it without slowing down the brain waves and quieting the mind, which is unnatural for us for most of the time because we have to survive. So I want to vilify. I don't want to vilify the five senses, and I don't want to vilify the conscious mind, and I don't want to vilify the ego. Without the ego,
Right.
we'd be lost.
Right. Yes, we need all of that. I love that exercise. To say a yes question and feel around, what does yes feel like in my body? What does no feel like in my body? I think that's fabulous. For someone like, how do you know where to begin? when you've never tapped into your body one way or another, how do you then it gets to be this mental thing of like, well, was that a yes or was that a no? Like maybe I don't know what this was. Practice asking the yes question, where do you feel it? Ask the no question, where do you feel it? Practice that for a while.
Or you meant my twins, one of them can do it, one of them can't. Just cannot. And I bring them up on stage. They know the drill now.
Yeah.
I say, I think a yes question. And then I look at them and say, honestly, do not lie. Where'd you feel it? And one will say, yes, was here. No, was here. The other one's like, I felt nothing, Daddy. And ironically, the one who has the feelings is not as good of a manifester. And the one who's hyper-focused, very, very mental, who doesn't feel much and uses other techniques that are in the book, is a master manifester. He does things that to this day, I'm like, how did you do that? You were 6 at the time. And
wow.
He's learned how to get around everything. He knows I'm not his source of everything. He's figured it out. He loved Kylie Minogue. He wanted to get tickets or something. She made him a video and posted it on Instagram with his name and his brother's name. And I mean, the things he's done to me, and I have the proof of the meditation where he tried to communicate with Kylie Minogue. And then a month and a half later where she made him a video and she never saw that video. They had nothing to do with each other.
Oh, wow.
And so it doesn't matter what your superpowers are. Don't compare yourself to other people. Read a book like mine, for example. Do the exercises for fun. Don't try to change your life. Just have fun. Add some knowledge to your world. Learn some stuff. And then maybe you might gain that little friend, that little whisper that might put you on your path or keep you on your path, or when you're down in the dumps, give you guidance on how to get out of it.
I love that. That feels like a really beautiful, natural place to stop. Any final words or thoughts? Obviously, I wouldn't walk. I would run to go buy this book, The Intuition Bible, for anybody listening. Any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners? I'll put all of your information in the show notes. But anything you want to say or mention?
Well, there's a couple of things. I'll say it really fast. One, I do this really cool hypnotherapy session where you come to me with 4 of your questions that you're like dying to know the answer to. I take you as deep as you allow me to go. And then I ask you the same questions. And then you give me your own answer. And that's one of my most popular services that people love. Other than the group coaching that I'm starting, because the group coaching is really fun to do for intuition. But that one's the one that people like, one person does it and like 10 more people show up because of that one, because you get to see and live what life would be with taking your own advice and extract the vibration of it and anchor it. And then so you can manifest it easier, and also people take their own advice a lot more. And then the second thing is, when you're feeling like crappy and when you're down in the dumps, even though sometimes it feels like you're alone and you can't feel your spirit guides and you've made some huge bad decisions and you feel like life is over, my only thing that I want to tell you is that don't judge yourself. Who cares? This is just the fun simulated game that we're playing. And the bad stuff continues when you start saying, I'm a bad person. I made a mistake. I'm done. Don't be unremorseful. Say, hey, I'm not going to do this again, but I'm not a bad person because I did it. And no one is judging me. And no one other than myself is judging me. I'd release myself or forgive myself. And I allow myself to be a human being no matter what I've done. And I will learn from this and I will grow from this. And I will be the best version of myself as I can. And if I don't do that, it's okay. It's okay. Just love yourself like you'd love your child.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Happy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Abby.